Hi, everybody. My name is Levi Cermak, and I'm with the Maverick Venture Fund, and Jack Keating with Corral Technologies. Today, we're going to be talking about Jack's experience with the Maverick Venture Fund and what it's like to build a startup in Nebraska and what Corral Technologies is doing. For those of you that might not know, the Maverick Venture Fund is a student-run venture capital group inside of the University of Nebraska at Omaha. The students make the investing decisions, perform the due diligence and research, and work with founders. There we teach venture capital basics, angel investing, and what it's like to be an entrepreneur in Nebraska and how to navigate the startup ecosystem. So like I said, we're joined here by Jack. Jack, thanks for being here.
Well, thank you, Levi, for having me. I appreciate all the support we've gotten from the Maverick Venture Fund. And just to tell you everyone a little bit more about myself. I grew up ranching in northern Nebraska, where we had about 300 head of cows. And after digging enough fence posts and moving cows and seeing the struggles of remaining profitable, even though you're working these 60+ hour weeks, day after day, I decided, there has to be a better way of doing this. And there has to be some sort of system to make ranchers' lives way more profitable with a whole lot less work. And that's the whole goal of Corral.
Really cool. So tell me about kind of that first moment that you had the idea, and then what did you do to turn it into something that wasn't just an idea?
Yeah, so the idea started, my dad and I were actually going out to fix fence in the morning, and he was like, hey, wouldn't it be nice if we could just use invisible fences for dogs, but for cows? But at that point, burying lines, miles and miles of lines like invisible fences for dogs didn't sound too appealing for me. And I didn't have the technical knowledge of how to figure out the product yet. So after several years of college, I finally figured out, okay, we can do this, the systems are available. And then we were able to take it from this idea of burying lines in the ground to, okay, now ranchers can draw their fences on their map, see their cows, move them and confine them just at the touch of a button.
That's really cool. And it sounds like it's a huge shakeup from what the industry is used to practicing. Tell me about some of the challenges of navigating an industry where there's a lot of legacy and a lot of inherited practices.
Yeah, I think it's sometimes can be difficult, but I think most of the producers now are seeing this transition into, okay, there are more efficient ways that we can produce these animals and different ways that we need to be accepting. So the acceptance of the system overall has been very good from ranchers. So it's been interesting seeing that from kind of a legacy industry, that there hasn't been a whole lot of pushback on the system. A lot of people think, okay, I would love to use this, right? It saves me a ton of time and a backbreaking work.
So how old were you, or you mentioned being an undergrad when you first had the idea?
Yeah, I was in high school. So
okay.
I think I was probably like 16 when the idea first came about for that.
And so then did you go and so you are trained in mechanical engineering at UNL, correct? At Lincoln? Yep. Okay. And so is that why you pursued that degree, is to build out this idea?
To be honest, I had no clue what I was going to do in college. I was originally, I think, economics.
Okay.
And then one of my buddies was doing mechanical engineering. And I was like, I like building stuff. So I went down that route, and turns out I really liked it, and it all turned out well. I now can use some different aspects of my degree to build the system and use problem solving a lot. So it was a good choice overall.
So I want to go back to kind of what were your first steps in actually starting it? Obviously, you started off with some research of some kind.
Yeah, the biggest thing was researching components, right? Because rotational grazing was already a thing to increase kind of efficiency, but it's time consuming and costly. So you say, okay, what components do we need to make this happen? And so it started off with component research. And then once you figure out what components are necessary, then going into actually how do we implement this the best way possible.
Sure. So you mentioned rotational grazing, and I'm sure there might be some folks watching that have no idea what we're talking about. So can you kind of give a brief explanation of the problem you're addressing, and then what rotational grazing is and why it's important?
Yeah, definitely. So the older way of grazing, and in some places it still is applicable, is called continuous grazing. And that type of system, cows are put out in the pasture and they aren't moved throughout the whole grazing period of around 6 months. So during that time, the cows stay usually around a certain area. They pick and choose what grasses they eat because they like those more, leading to overgrazing and poor pasture health overall. But it's very low management, low time. You put them out there, you don't have to worry about it that much throughout the rest of the year. With rotational grazing, you'll take that big pasture and you might break it up into 10, 15, maybe even more pastures and move them around more frequently. What that does is it gets the cows to use more of the pasture, allowing them to get better manure distribution, eat all the different types of plants, and overall increase the utilization rate from around 35% with continuous grazing to upwards of 65% with this rotational grazing. So increasing that utilization allows ranchers to carry more cows per acre and increases their profits.
Okay, so you mentioned more cows per acre and increased profits. Can you take us through what the comprehensive impact on a farm would be for a rancher?
Yeah, so the impact for a rancher, specifically with our system, is being able to increase their herd sizes, their carrying capacity of the land by upwards of 20%, increasing the weights of their calves by almost 20 pounds, and being able to just save tons of labor, time, and materials, because you don't have to go out and put up that temporary fence or permanent fence. You don't have to go and do maintenance on that fence year after year.
Fantastic. Okay, so how old are you right now, Jack?
I'm 23.
23. So what's it been as a 23-year-old? I'm assuming you started how old were you when you started this?
I think it was 20.
20. What's it been like being a 20-year-old in an industry with a lot of older men?
It's been interesting. I think the biggest thing you can do is, like, I know I'm not the smartest guy in the room. And so being able to say, okay, I know I'm not the person that knows most about this. How can I leverage like these other people that have been through the experiences? So I think it's been great. It is interesting for sure being a younger person in the entrepreneurship world, but I think it's great to have these other people that have experience to where you can go and leverage them to make your company better.
That's been fantastic. Kind of seeing you from afar connect all the way through the Nebraska ecosystem. So what's it like specifically in Nebraska being the founder of a startup?
I think it's been great, especially where we're doing ag tech. There are so many farmers and ranchers that we can go out and do outreach to and like test our products with. So it's been great in that regard to being able to go out and use our products right outside our back door. And then also just with the full ecosystem of Nebraska and the startup community, it's been great. We've gotten tons of support from Lincoln, Omaha, everywhere, to where everyone's just trying to help build up the company, I feel like. And it's been an amazing experience.
What's it been like raising funds in Nebraska?
It's been really great. A lot of our initial funding came from pitch competitions and grants, and that's really how we got the system off the ground. And then being able to have UNO, the Maverick Venture Fund, the Husker Venture Fund, and these other Nebraska Angels, Invest Nebraska. I mean, there's tons of different groups you're able to pull in, and people that want you to succeed and want Nebraska to succeed in the entrepreneurship world.
So do you think as a student, you were able to leverage more resources than if you weren't a student?
I think there were quite a few resources there, whether it be professors from the Entrepreneurship Center, professors from the engineering side of things. There's a lot of different resources where you can go ask questions about, hey, how should I best build this? And then there's also the pitch competitions. Being a student, definitely go try your hand at all the pitch competitions you can, because the worst thing you're going to do is learn. So I think there was quite a few opportunities there as a student.
Sure. So what advice might you give a founder that's still in school? What are some of the important things they need to be doing, and how do they take advantage of that really short window of time?
I think the biggest thing is taking advantage of your resources. I mean, you have professors, pitch competitions, all these different aspects where you can go and get help. You just need to go and take the step and go ask for help. And then make sure you're passionate about it. You're going to get kicked in the teeth a few times. So make sure you're strapped up and ready to go for the long haul, because it's what it is.
Cool. So you participated in Motion in the Combine, right?
Yes.
Can you tell us about that experience?
It's been great. I came to the Combine August of 2020, and I came to them with 20 customer interviews and a rough 3D model of the collar we wanted to use. And I think they've been extremely helpful in, developing the business plan, the business model, and really how we're going to take this thing from small scale testing to all the way up to, 100,000 units or more. So they've been extremely helpful through that process. And then the G Beta and in-motion programs that we were able to go to, kind of pulled everything together and gave more of a foundation that we could build Corral off of. So being able to go and talk to a ton of mentors, investors, being able to make those connections and just have those conversations was extremely helpful.
Who are some of the people that have really helped you along the way that you'd like to give a shout out to?
I'd say Matt Foley from the Combine, he's been extremely helpful. Vishal Singh, Quantified Ag, he's been great with just answering questions and everything. Mitchell Stevenson from the University of Nebraska, Lincoln, he's a associate professor doing grazing systems and grazing studies. And then Zach Morsey from Lincoln, he's actually where we're testing at, and he's been extremely helpful as well.
Sounds like you've got a great team and a great group of supporters. You mentioned something that I think is really important there, and that you got mentoring from a previous founder in your industry that's been in the shoes that you've walked in, or that you're trying to walk in, excuse me. So as you think about the Nebraska startup ecosystem, what are some of those other really important things, such as founder mentorships, that you really leaned into?
Yeah, I think with any problem you're trying to solve, most likely it's been done some way before in some form.
Right.
It probably won't be the exact same, but in some form, right? So being able to leverage those relationships and say, hey, you're a hardware startup, we're also building a hardware enabled startup. How did you do this manufacturing? All these different aspects to where they've already been able to scale. Okay, we can do similar aspects to them and ask them questions and say, okay, you ran into this issue. How do we avoid that as best we can? Is one of the best things I feel like, you can do.
Sure. So in my role in Maverick Venture Fund's role, we're supporters of founders, and that's kind of our guiding compass. So what are some things that we and others in the ecosystem can be doing more or doing less or better in order to better support founders?
I think one of the biggest things, from the Maverick Venture Fund that we've been able to get is a lot of different perspectives, because it's student-led. There's a lot of students involved in it, and just talking to all the different students and saying, okay, this person has this idea and this idea. It's been extremely helpful just to get feedback, and I like to get feedback as much as possible. So I think giving feedback to startups is always good, whether they like to hear it or not. And then being able to just give support where you might find connections that may be valuable. Whether, like for us, like rancher connections are amazing, and being able to get feedback from them, but just any other connections to whatever industry it is for a specific startup. I think that's where startups can learn the most and potentially gain a lot of insight into the industry.
Sure. So for the other founders that might be considering applying to the Maverick Venture Fund, can you just walk through what your experience was like with the students?
Yeah, it was a great experience, going to the social events and being able to actually see everyone in person and like have conversations with them and answer questions about the system was amazing. And build those connections up was just a great experience. So I'd say the social events were a great time, and being able to come and present to the group and field their questions was an amazing experience too, just because, like I said before, you're getting that feedback that is always helpful.
Right. And so what are your thoughts on teaching venture capital as a subject, or students making investment decisions?
I think it's a good way to get out in the world, right, and get that real world experience. Whether you are an entrepreneur or want to go into venture capital, you're getting that real world experience and actually making investments, right? This isn't a game anymore. This is real life stuff where you can learn, all right, we made this investment. Was it good? Was it bad? What can we learn from it? And getting that insight and knowledge is extremely helpful. And even if you're an entrepreneur in the Maverick Venture Fund, you're still getting insight and saying, all right, we invested in this company, it didn't go well. How can I avoid the issues that they ran into?
Right. And I mean, from our perspective, it was great working with you as well. Talking with Nathan Hohensee, who is the student lead on your team. He had great things to say about you in terms of how you communicated, your follow through. And so it was a great experience for us as well. So what's next for Corral?
What's next for Corral is we're building out our system. We're going to be launching out a pilot program here very soon. And then once we get that pilot program done, it's about 6 ranches is what we have signed up right now. We're going to be iterating, making the best, most reliable product we can, and launching. Our goal is this fall. But really over the next several years, we want to grow out to be not only a U.S. major virtual ranching system seller, but also we want to expand out across the U.S. and into South America, Canada, and across the globe.
What are some of your biggest hurdles in that journey?
I think the biggest hurdles really be, making sure we can scale correctly and efficiently, because our system does have limitations in communication and in other points. How can we make sure to scale this in a manner where sales process is as short as possible and that we can do it at as quickly as possible to give those ranchers the units and be able to disperse it.
Awesome. So for those that are watching that might be an investor or have some experience as a founder, what can we and what can they be doing to help you and to help Corral?
I think the number one thing is rancher connections. I always love talking to ranchers and being able to get their feedback on it, because there's nothing, no one says the same thing usually. And then also we are raising funds right now. So if there are any investor relations out there and connections that may be interested in, building the next great ag tech startup, then they can reach out to myself, or we can do some sort of introduction.
Awesome. Is there anything else that you want to leave this interview on?
I just want to say thank you to the Maverick Venture Fund. With that funding, we were able to hire on 2 new employees, and they've been extremely helpful in pushing out features. And now we're ready to kind of push out this next generation of product, and it's very exciting. And I just want to say thank you to you guys for
Absolutely. And thanks to you as well for applying to the Maverick Venture Fund and for sitting here with us. And let's go round up some ranchers.
Sounds like a plan. Time to get them cows.
All right. Thanks, man.
Thanks, Levi. I'm Jack Keating with Corral Technologies. We're building a virtual fencing system to allow ranchers to track, move, and confine their cattle. We are currently in the process of iterating and scaling our system. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out at corraltechnologies.com or email me at jackkeating@corraltech.com.